Okay guys, welcome to this week's Q&A. We've had quite a few come in on the back of this week's tutorial videos. We've had a lot of hate on social media again as well. Like, it's a double-edged sword. When the hate comes in, it boosts the algorithm. We get loads more interest in what we're doing. But it does bring the retards. And it gets tiring, I ain't gonna lie. So, please do remember, the little clips we put out, be it 10 seconds or 20 seconds or whatever, they're just a tiny little section of the really long videos that we put in the insiders group on Patreon. So the long tutorials probably explain all the points you're trying to bring up in your comment, and you know, wasting your time doing that. But anyway, we've got better things to be getting on with. So this week's questions are mainly centered around the content we've been putting out around Kururunfa and Saifa. First one being differences between pre-World War II Kururunfa and post-World War II Kururunfa. So in the tutorial, we spoke about the different ways of opening, be it inside, be it over the top this way, or being it the more so-called pre-World War II version that we see in KO's organisation. Now, there's footage going around, I think it's from like 1938, the footage you see of Miyagi Chojin's students training. Photographs of that time as well. If you follow Andreas Quest's Patreon, he's put out photographs of Miyagi actually at the location behind the camera, so he's there present while all this stuff's going on. So what you were seeing of the students is what he was teaching them at that time around 1938. So it gives a very good, candid look behind the scenes into what was going on in that period. Now, in that footage, we do see some Kururunfa. There's like maybe the first third of the kata. We see the opening, whereby the student comes kind of the inside way, this way, right? We see the kansetsuge, and then we see this double hand section. The practitioner looks pretty well developed in terms of physicality. It's the same student, by the way, that does the tensho. Now, it's okay. It's okay. I've learned not to get my expectations too high when you do see the old footage. I can remember vividly seeing footage of Funakoshi, seeing footage of Eiichi Miyazato, seeing footage of Shoshin Nagamine, and Gogen Yamaguchi being the big one that springs to mind as well, where when I saw the footage, it didn't quite match what I'd read about the person. I can remember being very disappointed that they didn't appear to be as good as I had built them up to be in my head. And it's the same thing when we look at the footage from that time in that 1938. It's nice to see what was going on at that time, but you know, we're talking about, it appears to have been filmed at using his group from the Naha Commercial High School. So we're talking about very young high school students, probably pretty early on in their development in learning the Goju-ryu system. So maybe, you know, at most 3-4 year students, you know, probably a bit less in some cases. So to expect too much of them is probably a little bit optimistic. So what we're seeing is very, very basic what Miyagi Sensei was teaching at that time. And it's important to remember, across most of his students, he had some longer term students, you know, but a lot of people trained with him just for a few years, you know. One of my teachers, Kinjo Sekichi Sensei, he was only with him for 4 years. The rest of his training coming from Miyazato Sensei, who was there for a lot longer, obviously. So we need to bear in mind, even Miyagi Sensei didn't spend that long with Kanryo Higono. So when we look at Okinawan karate in general, there wasn't this process of being with a teacher for 30, 40, 50 years that, you know, we now see. At that time, you were talking maybe for a 5-year apprenticeship, 10 years at best. How much can you really learn at that time? You know, I've been with my teachers a long time, and I don't know everything, and I've misrepresented some stuff, I've misremembered some things, a lot of my own nuances and behaviours come into my teaching style. So I cannot say that I teach KO's system, or I cannot say that I teach Richard Barrett's system. It's kind of become an amalgamation of the various different things I've learned, even outside of Goju-ryu, in terms of the Muay Thai I do, the BJJ I do, the MMA, all the different things I've done have resulted in what I teach and how I teach it. You cannot come to me expecting to learn what KO does. And like I say, in some cases, I can't do it. So it has to be adapted and adjusted according to my body type. So it's important to remember that when we look at any of Miyagi Sensei's downline students or downline systems. regardless of the lineage. So again, so Kururunfa, so there's some contradictions. Again, when we look at history, so I was told pre-World War II, there's this, it comes more like a Shuto-uchi. And if we look at the Hanashiro Chomo version of Kururunfa or Nunfa, it seems to coincide with this more Shuto-uchi end position. Later Goju-ryu comes more to this position here, where it's you end up here, right? But in the video of the pre-World War II 1938, we do see it comes on the inside. It doesn't come on the outside. So again, there's a contradiction between what I was told and what video evidence would suggest is going on at the time. So the history as such is a mess. It's a mess. So my best advice when it comes to Goju-ryu history, pay it lip service at best. Have a understanding of the romanticized version of it, because the real version we're never gonna know. And that's the truth of it. You're never gonna know. So it brings me to my second question this week regarding Saifa. So in one of the videos I stated, Hokama Sensei told me Saifa was created in 1940. And I asked you guys, have you heard of it being any earlier? Mr. Joe Swift came back to me and said that he's seen written testimony of 1938, a written mention of Saifa kata in 1938. So if that's the earliest, that Joe Swift is someone I massively respect in terms of history, you know, who actually does his homework and comes up with new stuff. He doesn't just regurgitate what everyone else says and pretend he invented it. He actually does the homework. So I like anything that Joe Swift I tend to listen to. So he says 1938 is his first time he's come across the term Saifa in relation to the kata. Now Saifa, the two kanji, you see written all over the place in certain Buddhist scriptures, certainly the works that are attributed to Bodhidharma, right, or Daruma. So we see the Ekin-kyo, the Suizen-kyo, but you see Saifa is written, the term Saifa, the two kanji, they appear frequently in those texts. So even though the kata might not have been in existence, the kanji and the phrase Saifa, albeit different pronunciations or whatever, that had been in use for hundreds of years. So maybe Miyagi Sensei saw that term, he liked that term, and he put that label onto whatever kata he was kind of coming up with in terms of piecing together his form Saifa. Now we see some photos, right? There's photos of Miyagi Sensei and Juhatsu Kyoda training together where Miyagi Sensei has caught the leg, he's caught the arm, and he's kicking to the groin. You're probably all familiar with it. There's other photos from that sequence where Miyagi Sensei is doing like an augmented block, and another one where he's doing a single leg takedown. I was told by Hokama Sensei, those photos, originally there were 10 of those, and to his knowledge only the 3 exist, but there was a series of 10 that he's aware of. It'd be interesting to know what those other photos show, you know, are they connected? Are they completely separate things? Is it just like, there's a lot of questions you can ask around those particular photos, and those 3 in particular, because they're all showing completely seemingly unlinked things. Anyway, the single one looks like Saifa. We see another photo of Miyagi Sensei teaching, you've got Jinnan Shinzato Sensei's teaching, you have 4 students, and one of them has caught the leg and has caught the arm, is doing the same groin kick that you see Miyagi Sensei doing. Again, looks like Saifa. Interesting aside to that photograph, I was told by my teacher, Richard Barrett, he asked Miyazato Sensei about that photograph, and he said, you know the photograph where they're doing Saifa? And Miyazato Sensei apparently got quite angry, a little bit out of character to him, and sort of said, like, how do you know it's Saifa? What do you know? How do you know? Why are you calling it Saifa? So very dismissive of the kind of like intimation that it was showing Saifa. Miyazato Sensei was like, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. That's not, you know, how do you know it's Saifa? Which I thought was quite interesting. I've been told those photographs actually attributed to Seisan application. Again, I can't verify the provenance of that. It's just something I've been told. Interestingly, if you look at some of the Ippon Kumite within the Meibukan, very similar to some of these sequences. Some of the Kiso Kumite of Toguchi Sensei look very similar to some of these sequences that you see in the photographs. Incidentally, the same position, the same application you also see in the Garden Dojo, the Karate Kenkyubu in Waseda, whereby you had Miyagi Sensei teaching, you had Mabunine, you had Hanashiro Chomo, Motobu Choyu, all these different guys teaching in this same thing. Anyway, there's photographs you've probably seen them, and there's two. There's some people doing Hojo-Ondo. The second one, there's a lot of application stuff. Higaseiko, I think, is doing the single leg takedown, and you have someone else catching the leg and kicking the groin. Someone else got someone on the deck, and they got the thumbs in the eyes, like that's the position in Saifa. So again, you see these same things in photograph form, clearly important because they've chosen to display that in those photos. But then you don't see an overt training apparatus whereby that is then replicated across all schools. It seems to be fragmented. It seems to be a little bit here, but it's not quite intact as it's been passed further down the line, which I find interesting. Again, it shows a difference between the way it was trained before World War II and the almost rushed way it was taught post World War II, where it was just more a case of getting the information out, getting the kata out there, and then that will outlive Miyagi, you know, and that will be his legacy, rather than the training. I think it seems almost like the training method had been discarded. The training method up until that point being Sanchin based, Hojo-Ondo, Junbi-Ondo, building the foundations, building the Goju framework. These set piece kind of like application drills, the Ippon Kumite, the variations of that you see in the various photographs. And then post World War II, it seems to be more as a form of almost gymnastics, you know, just kind of like retaining the information and using it as an exercise protocol. The point I was coming back to, the 3 year Sanchin, God damn it, it's gone. I've lost my train of thought with that. I'll see if I can come back to it. So that for me is just interesting how the difference between the teaching methods, right? So when we look at anything in terms of Goju history, it is so fragmented. Everybody has an agenda. Everybody is trying to promote their lineage as being the premier one, the one that was kind of closest to Miyagi Sensei, or the one that was carrying the flag. And the truth be told, everybody got a bit of it. You know, nobody got the whole thing. Everybody got a bit of it. And as a result, as we've got further and further down that line, it's become more and more fragmented. And still, we've got even less little bits of it. So in my opinion, the way to bring it all back together and unify it is to look back to the way they were training. Not necessarily what they were training in, but the way they were training pre-World War II, where the focus was upon Sanchin. The focus was upon building foundations through the use of the Junbi-Ondo, the Hojo-Ondo, the two-man drills, designed to build the Goju-ryu framework, to build the Goju engine. Until you have that engine, none of this other stuff makes sense. None of it is relevant. All of it is fragmented until it is condensed and brought back together. So this is what's meant by the Kaishu and the Haishu. The Kaishu and the Haishu, but the closed hand and the open hand. The closed teachings, the open teachings. In order to open a teaching, you first have to close them. And I think that's the job we have to do right now, is to come back to source, come back to Sanchin, come back to Tensho, really discover how they form the foundations of everything else that we do. Because a lot of people say it, but hardly anybody displays it, or hardly anybody can explain it and show you how to do it, which has been my whole purpose in the Karate Collective work and what we do on the Insiders List, is to try and show you how all these things link back together and how it all links back to the Sanchin. And it is a layered system. You start here, you layer upon layer upon layer upon layer. So you're building a martial arts lasagna. Okay. Anyway, that's just my thoughts on the questions that have come in this week. Little bit of a longer video, so hopefully there's some nuance in here for those of you who have the attention span and want to come on here and attack me. Hopefully there's enough information for you to dissect and not form your opinion too quickly on. Maybe give me the benefit of the doubt on some things, okay? But for those of you who do enjoy the information and post your questions and your support, it is much appreciated above the noise, guys. I do hear you and I do notice you, so thank you very much for the support. Have a good week, guys, and I'll see you soon.